Hey, hey, hey. Time for another Out of This World story from rSpace. What happens when what happens in Cabo refuses to stay there? Today on rSpace, a leap of faith and a ticket to paradise. I surprised my cheating wife and her affair partner at a foreign resort. I ruined her vacation with divorce papers and destroyed her affair partner's marriage too. So, I found myself in a pretty crappy dilemma, and I honestly don't know how I'm supposed to navigate the position that I found myself in. First off, let me say that my marriage is a lie. I've been lurking here for a long time, hoping that I'd spot the signs if anything is going wrong with my marriage, and I think that's what made me vigilant enough to figure out what was going on. But before that, I really thought that I had something that was different. Clearly, I was pretty stupid for thinking that, and maybe all women truly are the same. Anyway, what you need to know is that I, 32 male, have been married to my wife, 31 female, for almost 6 years now. For the sake of this, let's just say that her name is Sabrina. We both met rather coincidentally at an electronics retailer. I was trying to build a new rig, and she was there looking for a monitor. She approached me and said that I seemed like I knew what I was doing, so she asked if I could help her choose one. We started talking, and that was basically how we met. We're both technology inclined, so that certainly helped out. Anyway, we dated for about 3 years. I proposed, and now we're married. As I'm writing this, it really sucks to look back at all of that and realize that it was a complete waste and that you never really knew the person that you were with. It's very important to me to mention that Sabrina has 2 very good girlfriends, and the 3 of them all make up a little friend group. I met them extremely early in our relationship, and they've sort of become friends of mine in a way, though I obviously have people in my life that I'd consider much better friends. I don't know these girls' birthdays off the top of my head or anything too intimate, but when we see each other, we're all chummy with one another. My suspicions began on a day when I walked in from the garage and found my wife on a phone call with her girls. But as soon as I walked in, she seemed to get all shifty. It was clear that they were talking about something that wasn't for anyone else's ears. But besides my teasing and asking what they were talking about, it could have been 100 things completely unrelated to me. I didn't really get much of a serious response. So I left it at that and went about my day. About 5 minutes later, when I was about to enter the room she was in again, I stopped to listen in, and I could hear her talking in a hushed voice. I could barely make out what was being said, but I heard mentions of a trip and a lot of talk about a he. But the thing was, I knew she was going on a trip, but I couldn't figure out what there was that was so secretive about that. So, some more background is that she already told me about her plans for her and her girls to take a trip to Cabo, and I didn't really have much of an issue with it. I initially wanted to see if I could go along, but I didn't want to be that guy that infringes on the female time, so I decided to sit things out. I'd have been working during that time anyway, so I didn't need to try and move things around. But since I knew about the trip, I couldn't see what there was to hush about. But she was hardly like that when talking with her girls, so I was getting pretty suspicious. Eventually, she was off her phone call, and then she started acting unusually touchy and lovey-dovey with me. It reminded me of when a girl randomly comes to say, "I love you" at 3 a.m. She probably just got done doing something, and she needs to remind herself that she loves you. It's not like Sabrina wasn't loving, but coming after that call, it was odd. It was at that point that I realized I'd have to figure out things myself. I won't lie, I've snooped through her phone before on other occasions when I had suspicions, so I didn't need to fight some kind of internal battle before I did this time around. When you've known someone for nearly a decade, it's not hard to find those chances to grab their device and sneak through it. So that's exactly what I did this time around. It wasn't hard at all for me to get her phone and go straight to her group chat with her girls. Understand that at that point I wasn't looking for any other kind of evidence. Tell me why I see Sabrina and her girlfriends chatting about her trip and not their trip. They were telling her to take a lot of photos, how they were jealous, and encouraging her to show him a good time. Did they think she was going on a trip with me? Because that didn't make sense, since I thought she was going on the trip with them. And after scrolling much higher in the chat, that was when I was able to see that it definitely wasn't me she was talking about. She sent a picture of some guy standing near a lake with his shirt open and holding a beer. And then before that, she sent a picture of the 2 of them. The guy had his arm around her. I could not recognize who he was, but she mentioned the name Davis at a point in the conversation. She had never mentioned this person to me, that's for sure. And at that point in the conversation where his picture was dropped, they were just busy gushing over him, and she only responded with emoji to everything that they were saying. But the conclusion that I made from that was pretty simple. She had a boyfriend, or maybe just an affair partner, and it seemed like she was going with him on her trip to Cabo. The worst part was that her girls, who I consider to be friends, were in on all of this, and none of them seemed to have a single chastising word for her. Do you know what it's like to learn that your wife was planning a trip to a resort in Mexico and was planning to spend that trip with another man? I mean, I didn't even need evidence to know that they might have slept together at that point, and they were still planning to do more. It was quite frankly infuriating, and I put her phone down and left the house right away. I got back about an hour later, and she was super concerned about me, but I managed to assuage her fears. All of this happened yesterday, so it is extremely fresh in my mind, but at this point, I need to figure out what I'm going to do. I can confront her and just end things, but maybe I've been reading posts here far too long because that feels utterly unsatisfying. And I know that right after, they'll probably just keep sleeping with each other. I mean, it might even be me doing exactly what she wants, setting her free and giving her the chance to sleep with this Davis guy. The idea of that was driving me nuts. I'm just looking for some words to settle me, or perhaps some ideas on what I might be able to do. I want to see if I can find Davis online, and I'll figure out some more from there. But besides a divorce, I need to hit Sabrina hard. Edit. Somebody suggested I surprise her at her vacation getaway, especially considering I know all of the details of where she's going to be staying. And you know what? I like that. It's going to cost me quite a bit. And on top of a divorce, that is already going to cost me quite a bit. But at this point, I'm not sure that I care all too much. That might be the way for me to go. Ooh, you could book yourself into the same resort, maybe spend a few days enjoying the beaches, the sunsets, and the satisfaction of knowing you're in control. When the moment feels right, you bump into her. No yelling, no drama, just a quiet, "Hello, didn't expect to see you here." Let her squirm with the realization that her secret is out. Update 1. I never thought that my life would go the way of a badly scripted movie, but that has happened, and I can't but admit that I loved every single second of it. It's been about 2 weeks since my last post, which is about my wife who planned to take a trip to Cabo with her affair partner, under the guise of going on a girls' trip. I guess everyone in the comments who said that a girls' trip is never a reason for anything moral was right. In the end, I never confronted Sabrina about the situation directly. I just played along with the entire thing, making sure that she was still going to go on her trip, and once it was confirmed, I made sure to book a plane ticket and get lodging for a single day. I'd head out as soon as possible after that because I certainly wouldn't be in the mood for Cabo after a divorce was about to start. Obviously, getting tickets on such a short notice was painful, but I confirmed beyond any sense of to embarrassing her and ruining her secret getaway. Well, the day eventually came. I drove her to the airport, and then I watched as she got on the plane. I tried to look around for Davis, but I didn't see him. Either I just missed him, or they were going to arrive on different planes. It didn't matter to me anyway, though. I just needed to find the scumbag where she was going, and that would be enough. Later that day, she sent me pictures from her room at the resort, and later that day, I was on a plane too, with nothing but a backpack and the things I'd need for such a short day. I got to her resort at night, checked into my room, and hoped that everything I needed to do would be possible the next day. And I forgot to mention that I had already talked with a divorce lawyer at length and retained him. We had worked together and gotten the papers written so that all that was left was for me to serve them to her, and I was ready to do that in a pretty grand fashion. So, the next day I asked her what she was up to, and she sent me a picture by the pool of the resort. She said she was going to stick around, sunbathe, and maybe take a dip in the pool until this afternoon. At that point, she and the girls might go and explore the neighboring town. I told her that sounded good, and that she should have a lot of fun. Within minutes, I was dressed up and heading to the pool since I could confirm that that was exactly where she was thanks to that photo. So, I came down from my room and I immediately spotted her lying on one of those pool chairs, and sitting up beside her, rubbing sunscreen on her legs, was a man. I couldn't tell from afar, but I was sure that had to be Davis. At the last minute, I remembered to start recording, and I put my phone in my breast pocket. I wasn't sure how things might go. I walked up behind the two of them and stood there for a second. At that distance, I could tell it was the guy I had seen in her group chat. He glanced up at me, but then continued applying her sunscreen. She was shielding her face from the sun, so she didn't see me. After I stood there for another several seconds, he looked back up and said, "Can I help you?" It was only at that point that Sabrina looked at me. She jolted upright in an instant, and pretty comedically, she rubbed her eyes and then stared at me again, as if she wasn't sure she had seen right the first time. This time, her jaw actually dropped, and that's when I knew it had sunk in. "Take this," and I stretched the manila envelope towards her. She took it, but she hesitated. I think she had an idea of what was coming, but she was scared. Davis looked confused, and he stood up to confront me. Maybe because my rage at that moment was starting to become rather visible. "What's your problem, dude?" And then he placed a firm hand on my chest to push me back. I'm sure Sabrina knew that things weren't going to go well at that point because she grabbed his arm and tried to get him to sit down again, but he yanked away from her. I remember telling him that he was an a-hole and that he should take his hands off of me, but I think he must have felt the need to prove his manhood to Sabrina. At that point, the hand on my chest turned to a shove. I just shook my head and then with all my strength shoved him backwards. He stumbled over the pool chair that was behind him and fell into the pool. That was funny to me, despite the entire situation, and I actually remember laughing. I think that made him madder. In a brief time it took him to get out of the pool, I remember Sabrina saying, "Please, it's not what it looks like." I'm sure that was just the first thing that came to mind because there was no way she was going to explain it away. In return, I asked her where her girls were, and I hoped her girls' trip was going great since it seemed to be. At that point, she pulled the papers out of the folder, and in a second, she shoved them back in, crying right away. At this point, Davis had climbed out of the pool, sopping wet, and I was 100% sure that he was getting ready to throw a punch at me. The last thing I needed was to end up in a foreign jail, but fortunately for me, it seemed that some of the other visitors to the resort knew what was about to go down, so they stepped in between. I just walked away. Sabrina tried to walk after me, but I gave her a look that was so scathing that she just froze in her tracks. I could see the manila envelope in her hand trembling. As soon as I got back to my room, I packed everything I had, which literally only took 5 minutes, and then I checked out. I got the resort to get me a taxi to the airport, and about 15 minutes later, I was off. I had to stay at the airport for several hours because I checked out way ahead of time, but I honestly didn't care. I was just extremely glad to have done what I came for, gotten a video of her there with another man, and served her with the divorce papers. When I got back home, I slept like a baby. I really wondered whether she'd be coming back right away or whether she'd stick to her vacation shamelessly, but she was back 2 days after I returned. She came to the house and started begging me as soon as she set eyes on me, but I didn't give her the time of day. I told her to take the suitcases she had brought with her and go stay at her sister's house. And just like that, she did what I said and left. I haven't seen her for several days now, and I think she is smart enough not to call my phone or try and get in contact with me because she knows there's no saving it. But I'm glad that I did what I did. There's something satisfying about the way you didn't let rage take over but stayed calm, letting them dig their own graves, all the while knowing what was coming. Let her actions speak loud and clear. I bet that plane ride home felt good, OP. Update 2. I'm glad to say that the most dramatic episode of my life has finally concluded. It's extremely bittersweet. Obviously, it's bitter because I just found out that my wife of 6 years was cheating on me. But it is sweet because I won't be living a lie anymore, and I got my revenge in the process. So let me just fill you all in on how things went in the end before I swear off women for the rest of my life. It was a full week after Sabrina came back from Cabo that she finally reached out to me, saying that she wanted to give me time to think. Well, she certainly did, because without her begging in my ear, it was easy for me to reach the conclusion that I could do without her in my life. I couldn't stay with a woman who had been pulling the wool over my eyes the way she did. And to think that her friends who knew me were in on the whole thing and encouraging it just showed that all women are the same. The divorce happened all the same because I let her know that she messed up on a major scale, and there was honestly no saving it at that point. She took her affair partner to Cabo, and she thought that I'd be enough of a simp to forgive that? Nope. I worked tightly with my divorce lawyer. With the video that I had, some of the evidence from the chats I had taken from her phone, and the fact that she had gone to such lengths to be unfaithful, I knew things wouldn't work in her favor. We didn't have the most solid evidence, but my lawyer did his best mark to entertain transactions in our bank statement as having been spent to keep her affair alive. Some of them seemed to be a stretch, but a lot of them were probably true, because there was a transaction for a hotel stay that I couldn't remember, and that she couldn't explain in a sensible fashion. Plus, the entire trip to Cabo was deemed to be an expense that she used to foster her affair. It seemed that she decided to cut her losses and not go to court, but she didn't get even close to as much as her lawyer tried to get. We eventually settled that I'd take the house, I'd take the car, and she'd take about 30% of our joint savings since that was deemed to be her ratio when comparing our salaries. It was meant to be a little more, but all her affair expenses were essentially penalized, and needless to say, that worked pretty nicely for me. Her parents called to ask what was going on, and I told them the truth straight up. The same happened with her sister, and I did the same thing. I mean, if she wasn't going to get ahead of the narrative, I'd let them know the whole truth without any censorship. While that's where my story ends with her, that's not where the story ends. I forgot to mention in the previous post that I found Davis simply by searching through Sabrina's Facebook friends and looking at their photos. This guy was married, but for some reason, I wasn't really surprised by that. Their affair sort of gave the vibe of two married people cheating together. Well, I'm sure his wife was happy to see all the evidence I had, especially the video from Cabo. At first, she refused to believe it was real until I convinced her that I was the husband of the woman in the video. I also made sure to share the dates of the trip and everything else that I had felt he might have shared with her. It took her a full hour after that to say anything else, and a week after that, she said, "Thank you for sharing the truth with me. I was so angry at you before, but things have changed. Honestly, I'm glad I won't be living a lie anymore." And that was all I needed to see to know she was planning on ending things with him. I haven't followed up, but I hope she didn't have a change of heart. That's why cheating doesn't pay. My ex-wife lost her marriage, and now Davis likely has too, along with a video of him being pushed into a pool, which I may or may not have uploaded to a few public locations. Just be faithful, everyone. I swear it really isn't that hard. Getting to the house, the car, and a favorable settlement, well deserved after being everything she put you through, OP. Not only that, but the fact that his wife responded with relief says it all. You gave her the kind of clarity she needed, and it seems like both of you are better off now without all the deception. How have you surprised your cheating partner? Share it with us in the comments below. And thank you for joining us today on rSpace. Be sure to like and subscribe and hit that notification bell so you don't miss out on our next video. Until next time.